Tonight, we explore the life and legacy of Abraham Lincoln, the boy who grew up in a log cabin, worked by candlelight, and carried books through the woods, only to one day become the president who preserved a fractured nation. From humble beginnings to historic speeches, and from moral battles to the tragic night at Ford's Theatre, this is the story of a man whose shadow still looms over American history. So, before you get comfortable, as always, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, only if you enjoy our content. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Sometimes our stories are just too interesting for sleep, and trust us, we're working on some boring ones too. It's time now to dim the lights, turn on a fan for some noise, and let's cover what we have for tonight, together. Before Abraham Lincoln ever stood beneath marble columns, before his words echoed through history books and memorials, he was just a boy. Born on February 12, 1809, in a one-room log cabin in Hardin County, Kentucky, Abraham came into a world of cold winters, dirt floors, and hard hands. His father, Thomas Lincoln, worked as a carpenter and farmer, strong, proud, and stern. His mother, Nancy, was soft-spoken and deeply spiritual, offering what little tenderness she could in a life defined by scarcity. The cabin itself was more a shelter than a home. No windows, no insulation, just rough-hewn logs stacked tightly together. In winter, frost crept inside. Rain tapped on the wooden roof. Abraham would later say he was raised in the backwoods, and it wasn't a metaphor. This was survival. There were no libraries, no teachers, and hardly any books. But there was curiosity, and Abraham had that in abundance. By the time he was 2, the family moved to Indiana, seeking better land. Clearing forests by hand, the Lincolns built another cabin. Abraham, still small, helped however he could. He learned early that life was labor, and labor was life. But inside the stillness of those forests, a boy's imagination grew. He would walk miles just to borrow a book. Once, it's said, he ruined a borrowed copy of Life of George Washington when rain soaked through the walls of the cabin. To repay the damage, he worked for the owner for days, chopping wood and hauling water. That wasn't punishment. That was just the way things were. Neighbors described him as strange, tall for his age, awkward, often wandering alone with scraps of paper, scribbling quotes and poems by firelight. He had a memory like a trap and a love for words that felt unusual for a farm boy. But something in Abraham Lincoln, even then, was reaching upward, not toward power, not yet, just toward understanding. There, in the quiet woods of Indiana, beneath a leaky roof and beside a dwindling fire, a boy began building something far bigger than a log cabin. He was building a mind, a vision, a voice, and that voice would one day echo across a fractured nation. Every great life begins with a wound, one so deep it never quite heals. For Abraham Lincoln, that wound came at the age of 9. It was 1818. The Lincolns had settled in Indiana, carving out a life among thick woods and open sky. The days were long, filled with work, and the family survived on what they could grow, build, or barter. But something invisible and deadly was creeping through the countryside, something called milk sickness. No one understood it then. People fell ill without warning, their muscles weakening, their stomachs turning. Entire households could be wiped out in a matter of days. The cause? Cows grazing on white snake root, a toxic plant. The poison passed into the milk and into the people. Nancy Hanks Lincoln, Abraham's mother, was one of its victims. She grew weak fast. Abraham and his sister, Sarah, watched as their mother, their quiet, warm anchor, faded before their eyes. There was no doctor, no medicine. Just the dim hope that rest might save her. It didn't. Nancy died in the fall, wrapped in a blanket of leaves and silence. She was just 34 years old. Abraham, still a boy, helped carve her coffin with his father. They buried her on a small rise near the cabin, under a handmade wooden cross. He never forgot the moment. For weeks, maybe longer, Abraham said little. He wandered the woods alone, eyes lowered, shoulders heavier than any child's should be. Nancy had been his first teacher, the one who taught him to read, who encouraged his questions, who believed there was something special about her son. Her absence left a hollow place that even time couldn't quite fill. But grief didn't stop life. Thomas Lincoln remarried the next year, bringing a new woman, Sarah Bush Johnston, into the home. She was kind, patient, and brought books with her, actual books. Abraham took to her quickly, and she treated him like her own. In many ways, she helped stitch the boy's heart back together. Still, something had changed. From that point forward, Abraham Lincoln carried sorrow like a shadow, quiet, always close. It made him thoughtful, and it made him kind. Even as a boy, grief gave him depth. And later, as a man, it would give him empathy, the kind a president would need to carry a wounded country on his back. As the seasons passed, the boy from the log cabin began to grow, not just in wisdom, but in height. By the time he was a teenager, Abraham Lincoln stood out in every crowd. Literally, he grew tall, lanky, and long-limbed, 6 feet 4 inches by adulthood, in a time when most men were nearly a foot shorter. His trousers were always too short, his sleeves mismatched, his walk ungraceful. He was described as ungainly, curious, and even grotesque by some. But Abraham didn't care. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was trying to understand the world. He read constantly, lying on his stomach by the fireplace, feet kicking in the air as he devoured every book he could borrow or barter for. Shakespeare, Aesop's fables, the Bible, law texts, political speeches. He didn't just read, he studied, memorized, and reflected. Often he'd pause mid-chore to recite a quote or tell a story he'd rehearsed 100 times in his head. Neighbors found him odd. One farmer said, "That boy's always talking like he's already a senator or something." Another called him moony, always staring off, lost in thought. But Lincoln wasn't lazy. He worked hard, splitting logs, planting corn, digging wells. He was known for his strength, able to swing an axe all day without tiring. Yet even during work, his mind was somewhere else. He'd carve verses into fence posts. He'd jot legal arguments on scraps of bark. His hands were rough, but his thoughts were sharp. By his early 20s, Abraham had tried his hand at several trades. He worked as a store clerk, a postmaster, a rail splitter, and a flatboat crewman ferrying goods down the Mississippi River. These journeys opened his eyes, especially to the horrors of slavery, which he witnessed firsthand in the South. Still poor, still mostly self-educated, Lincoln moved to the small town of New Salem, Illinois. It was here that people began to notice him, not for his looks, but for his mind. He could tell a story that had the whole room laughing, then turn around and win a debate with clarity and calm. He wasn't polished. He wasn't powerful. But there was something magnetic about him. Something honest. Slowly, quietly, Abraham Lincoln was stepping into the light. Not as a hero, not yet. Just as a man beginning to find his voice. By the time Abraham Lincoln began his law career in Springfield, Illinois, he was no longer the silent, awkward woodsman. He was now a rising figure, thin as ever, still rough around the edges, but known for his sharp mind, quiet humor, and unmatched storytelling. And it was here that he met Mary Todd. She was unlike any woman he'd ever known. Born into a wealthy Kentucky family, Mary was educated, ambitious, and politically minded, traits not always welcomed in women of the 1800s. But she didn't shrink herself, and she wasn't intimidated by Lincoln's strange appearance or humble background. In fact, she admired his intelligence and his vision. "He's going to be President of the United States someday," she once said, and she meant it. Their courtship was passionate but rocky. Lincoln was unsure of himself, socially, emotionally, even financially. He once broke off their engagement without clear reason, spiraling into a period of depression so deep that friends feared for his life. He called it the hypo, short for hypochondria, but it was likely what we now recognize as clinical depression. He felt unworthy of her, maybe of happiness altogether. But somehow, the bond between them endured. They eventually married on a rainy November day in 1842. Abraham was 33, Mary was 23. It was not a perfect marriage. They fought often, especially during times of grief and political stress. Mary could be impulsive and sensitive. Abraham was withdrawn and emotionally guarded. Yet there was affection, and more importantly, loyalty. They would go on to have 4 sons: Robert, Edward, Willie, and Tad. Only Robert would live past his teenage years. The loss of their children, especially the death of young Willie in the White House, would crush Mary and deepen Abraham's melancholy. But in their own way, they carried each other through it. Mary believed in Abraham long before anyone else did. She encouraged his political ambitions, supported his difficult decisions, and endured countless public attacks for standing by his side. Their love wasn't neat or storybook. It was complicated, raw, sometimes painful, but it was real. And in a life filled with loneliness, criticism, and unimaginable pressure, Abraham Lincoln never doubted that one woman, however troubled, truly believed in him. In November of 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected the 16th President of the United States, but there was no celebration in the South. His name hadn't even appeared on ballots in 10 southern states. To many there, his election wasn't a political shift. It was a direct threat to their way of life. Within weeks, South Carolina seceded from the Union. One by one, 6 more states followed. They formed the Confederate States of America, with their own president, their own government, and a promise to defend slavery. Lincoln hadn't even taken office yet. When he finally arrived in Washington in March 1861, under heavy disguise due to assassination threats, the country was already on the brink. He wasn't stepping into a presidency, he was stepping into a firestorm, and then, the spark, Fort Sumter. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces opened fire on a U.S. military fort in South Carolina. The Civil War had begun. Lincoln's goal was clear, at least to him: preserve the Union, keep the country whole, but not everyone agreed with how to do that. He faced pressure from all sides: radicals who wanted immediate emancipation, moderates who feared change, border states that were teetering, and a divided Congress unsure whether Lincoln was up to the task. And truthfully, no one knew if he was. He had never led an army. He had no formal military training. His generals were indecisive, arrogant, or both. Early battles were disastrous. Thousands died. The North was humiliated, and people began to ask aloud if Lincoln was in over his head. But he never lost focus. He read reports late into the night, held endless meetings, studied maps until his eyes blurred. He visited wounded soldiers in field hospitals, shook hands with widows, and walked among the common people whenever he could. The White House itself became a kind of war room, and sometimes a prison. Lincoln barely slept. His shoulders slumped, his face hollowed. He was aging before the nation's eyes. Yet through it all, he remained steady. Not because he was sure he would win, but because he believed the Union was worth saving. The country was burning, and Abraham Lincoln, quietly and deliberately, walked into the flames. As the Civil War dragged into its second year, Abraham Lincoln faced a choice, one that would define not only his presidency, but the soul of the nation. The Union had suffered terrible losses. The public was growing weary, and whispers grew louder. What are we fighting for? For Lincoln, the war had begun as a fight to preserve the Union. But as the months passed and the blood spilled across fields and rivers, that purpose no longer seemed enough. Slavery, the moral wound at the center of America, could no longer be avoided. Lincoln hated it, always had. He once called it a monstrous injustice, but he also knew that ending slavery was a dangerous move. It risked alienating the border states that remained loyal to the Union. It could divide the North, and politically, it could destroy him. Still, he waited, he watched, and after the bloody Union victory at Antietam in September 1862, he made his decision. He would act. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. It declared that all enslaved people in Confederate-held territories were now and forever free. Legally, it was limited. It didn't free slaves in the border states, and it couldn't reach areas the Union didn't control. But symbolically, it was massive. With a single stroke of the pen, Lincoln reshaped the war. It was no longer just a battle for unity. It became a battle for human freedom. Critics attacked him. Some said it was unconstitutional. Others said it was too little, too late. But Lincoln was unmoved. He believed it was not only right, it was necessary. And something else happened, too. Thousands of formerly enslaved men joined the Union Army. They fought not just for country, but for their own future. Black regiments like the 54th Massachusetts became symbols of courage and sacrifice. The Emancipation Proclamation did not end slavery. That would take more time, more pain, and a constitutional amendment. But it lit the path forward. Lincoln had taken a gamble, a moral stand in the middle of chaos. And though the cost would be high, the meaning of the war and of America itself had changed forever. By 1863, the Civil War had become a grinding, endless tragedy. Towns turned to graveyards, fields became oceans of mud and bone, and the man at the center of it all, President Abraham Lincoln, was bearing a weight no human was meant to carry. He was, in many ways, the loneliest man in America. Photographs from the time show a man transformed. His once youthful face was now lined, sunken, solemn. His eyes carried the heaviness of 1,000 telegrams announcing the dead. Sleepless nights, political warfare, and personal grief had carved deep shadows into his features, and grief followed him everywhere. In 1862, the Lincoln's 11-year-old son, Willie, died suddenly of illness while living in the White House. The boy had been Lincoln's joy, intelligent, curious, full of laughter. His death devastated the family. Mary was inconsolable. She wore black for years, dabbled in spiritualism, and slipped further into emotional turmoil. For Abraham, it was one more wound in a life already marked by loss. Yet, he kept going. He read casualty lists each morning. He paced the halls of the executive mansion deep into the night. Sometimes, he visited hospitals to speak with wounded soldiers, quietly moving from bed to bed, holding hands, offering comfort, often with tears in his eyes. He wrote letters to grieving parents, each word measured, personal, human. In November 1863, he traveled to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of one of the war's bloodiest battles. There, in just 272 words, he delivered what would become one of the most famous speeches in American history. The Gettysburg Address wasn't long. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. He spoke of a new birth of freedom and a government of the people, by the people, for the people. He reminded a weary nation what it was fighting for, but privately Lincoln struggled. He questioned whether he was doing enough, whether the war would ever end, whether the country, so bitterly torn, could truly come together again. Still, he carried on, not with fire, but with quiet resolve. Because deep down, Abraham Lincoln understood something others didn't. That leadership wasn't about appearing strong. It was about remaining steady, even when everything around you was falling apart. On April 14, 1865, the sun rose over Washington, D.C., warmer and quieter than usual. The war was ending. Just 5 days earlier, General Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. After 4 long, bloody years, Peace was finally within reach. Abraham Lincoln felt it. For the first time in months, maybe years, he smiled more freely, walked a little lighter. He told his cabinet that morning he felt a great weight had been lifted. That afternoon, he took a carriage ride with Mary. They spoke of the future, of travel, of returning to normal life. For a moment, they were simply husband and wife again, not symbols, not survivors. That evening, they decided to attend a play at Ford's Theatre. The production was Our American Cousin, a light-hearted comedy. Lincoln arrived late and took his place in the presidential box overlooking the stage. He settled into his chair, a silk American flag draped gently in front of him. Then, at 10:15 p.m., while the audience erupted in laughter at a well-timed joke, a man slipped through the door behind him. John Wilkes Booth. A well-known actor and passionate Confederate sympathizer, Booth saw Lincoln not as a leader, but as a tyrant, and he believed that by killing him, he could revive the dying Southern cause. With a small Derringer pistol, Booth fired a single shot into the back of Lincoln's head. Chaos erupted. Booth leapt to the stage, shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis! Thus always to tyrants!" and escaped into the night. Lincoln was carried, unconscious and bleeding, across the street to a nearby boarding house. He was laid in a small bed, far too short for his towering frame. Doctors could do nothing. He never regained consciousness. At 7:22 the next morning, Abraham Lincoln took his last breath. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, standing at the foot of the bed, whispered, "Now he belongs to the ages." The man who had held a fractured nation together through war, loss, and doubt, was gone. And the White House door, which had always opened to him, would never open again. After Abraham Lincoln's death, the country entered a strange kind of silence, as if the war had taken its final breath with him. His body was placed in a simple wooden coffin and carried through the streets of Washington. Thousands lined the roads in mourning. Some stood in silence. Others wept openly. Entire families traveled for miles just to glimpse the passing of the train that would carry him home to Springfield, Illinois. The funeral procession stretched across cities and states. It was not just a farewell, it was a reckoning. Lincoln had become more than a man. He was now a symbol, a memory, a question whispered across generations. What does it take to hold a broken country together? He never lived to see the 13th Amendment officially adopted, the law that finally abolished slavery in every corner of the United States. But it passed because of him, because of the Emancipation Proclamation, because of the war he chose to finish, no matter the cost. He also never saw Reconstruction, the fragile and painful attempt to rebuild the South and redefine American freedom. Some historians argue that if he had lived, it might have gone differently, less harsh, more just. We'll never know. But his words endured. At Gettysburg, in his second inaugural address, in countless letters and speeches, Lincoln left behind not just policies, but principles, humility, compassion, a deep belief in the possibility of a more perfect union. He was not flawless. He was cautious, sometimes slow to act, often depressed, frequently overwhelmed. But he never lost sight of the bigger picture, and that's why his shadow still lingers, in classrooms and courtrooms, on coins and monuments. In times of division, people still turn to Lincoln, not because he had all the answers, but because he never stopped asking the right questions. What does freedom mean? What does unity cost? What must we endure to live up to our ideals? Abraham Lincoln once said, "The better angels of our nature must guide us forward." And maybe that's what he became in the end, not just a leader of his time, but a quiet angel of ours. Long before the American Revolution became a war, it was a feeling. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. In the mid-1700s, the 13 British colonies in North America were thriving. From the rocky coasts of New England to the tobacco fields of Virginia and the port cities of the Carolinas, people lived, worked, and traded under the flag of the British Crown. They were British citizens, proud of it even, but also something else. They were different, tougher, more independent, more used to making their own way. That independence, however, was beginning to feel threatened. After Britain's costly victory in the 7 Years' War, the empire needed money. So it turned to the colonies, imposing taxes and trade restrictions. The colonists were asked to help pay for a war they hadn't started, and for a royal army many of them didn't want. It wasn't just the money, it was the principle. No taxation without representation. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a declaration of dignity. The Stamp Act of 1765 taxed newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. The Townshend Acts taxed everyday goods like glass and tea. And then came the Tea Act, which led directly to a protest that would become legendary, the Boston Tea Party. On a cold December night in 1773, colonists disguised as Mohawk warriors boarded British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. It was dramatic, it was defiant, and it was the last straw. The British government responded with the Coercive Acts, or as the colonists called them, the Intolerable Acts. These laws punished Massachusetts harshly, closing its port and putting the colony under military rule. Suddenly, this wasn't just about taxes, it was about control, about whether distant rulers could govern people who had built a life of their own. Across the colonies, town meetings turned into resistance councils, merchants boycotted British goods, farmers joined militias. Men and women who once considered themselves loyal subjects now wondered, what if we didn't need a king at all? The colonies were no longer just restless, they were awakening. The fire of revolution hadn't started yet, but the smoke was rising, and it would not be ignored. Before bullets flew and flags were raised, the American Revolution was fought with words. Long before independence became a political demand, it was an idea, and ideas, once spoken aloud, are hard to contain. In taverns and coffee houses, at dinner tables and in churches, ordinary colonists began asking extraordinary questions. Could a king truly rule people who had never seen his face? Should a government thousands of miles away decide the lives of farmers in Virginia or blacksmiths in Boston? And then came the writers, thinkers who gave voice to this rising doubt. Samuel Adams stirred Boston's streets with fiery newspaper articles and secret meetings. John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, more measured but no less firm, argued for colonial rights in his Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania. And Benjamin Franklin, equal parts scientist and satirist, quietly spread revolutionary seeds across Europe and the colonies through pamphlets and essays. But perhaps the most explosive voice came from an Englishman, Thomas Paine. In January of 1776, Paine published Common Sense, a 47-page pamphlet that ripped apart the idea of monarchy. His words were plain, direct, and fierce. He wrote not for scholars, but for everyone. Shopkeepers, sailors, farmers, all could understand and feel the weight of his arguments. He called the king a tyrant. He called the colonies a nation. He urged independence, not in years, but now. "'Tis time to part," he wrote, and people listened. In just a few months, Common Sense sold over 100,000 copies, staggering numbers for the time. His words lit a match that would help ignite a revolution. But it wasn't just pamphlets. Speeches rang out in state houses. Letters crossed the colonies. The written word became a weapon, passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. And through these words, the colonies began to see themselves differently, not as scattered provinces, but as a single people with shared purpose. The British had muskets, the colonists had messages. And sometimes, words cut deeper than steel. The American Revolution would still need soldiers and sacrifice. But first, it needed voices brave enough to say what others only dared to think. It began under cover of darkness. On the night of April 18, 1775, British troops quietly marched out of Boston. Their mission was clear: arrest colonial leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock in Lexington, then seize weapons stockpiled in nearby Concord. They hoped to move swiftly, silent and unnoticed. But the countryside was already watching. Thanks to a network of spies, patriots had learned of the British plan. They knew time was short, riders were needed, fast, fearless men who could alert the militias before the redcoats arrived. The most famous of them was Paul Revere. He didn't ride alone. That night, Revere was joined by William Dawes and later Samuel Prescott. Each took separate routes through Massachusetts, galloping through villages and farms, pounding on doors, shouting the alarm. The regulars are coming out, not the British, as legend claims. Everyone in the colonies still considered themselves British, but they knew what it meant. Lanterns were hung in Boston's Old North Church, one if by land, two if by sea. 2 lights flickered in the steeple, signalling that British troops were crossing the Charles River by boat. The message spread like lightning. By morning, colonial Minutemen had gathered in Lexington. Farmers with hunting rifles, blacksmiths with muskets, merchants with powder horns. They were cold, nervous, untrained. And then, just after sunrise, British soldiers arrived. The 2 sides faced each other on the village green. No one knows who fired the first shot. But in that moment, a crack in the still morning air, history shifted. 8 colonists were killed. The British pushed onto Concord, only to find most of the weapons had been moved. Skirmishes broke out all along the return path to Boston. Militiamen, hiding behind trees and stone walls, fired at British columns from every angle. It was no longer a protest. It was war. The shot heard round the world, as it would later be called, marked the beginning of open rebellion. And it all started with riders in the night. Ordinary men who lit the fuse not with fire, but with urgency, courage, and a willingness to risk everything for a cause just beginning to take shape. In the early days of the Revolution, leadership was as uncertain as the morning mist over the New England hills. Amid chaos and untested militias, one man emerged as the natural choice to lead the rebellion: George Washington. Washington was not an obvious leader in the conventional sense. He was tall, reserved, and had a quiet dignity that set him apart. Before the war, he had already earned respect as a surveyor, a soldier in the French and Indian War, and a gentleman of Virginia's planter class. Yet, despite his distinguished background, he was not immune to doubts. Like many colonists, he had experienced setbacks and failures, but those experiences only honed his resolve. When the Second Continental Congress was assembled, the task of uniting the colonies under a single banner seemed insurmountable. Divisions ran deep, and the idea of a standing army was fraught with suspicion. In this fragile atmosphere, Washington was chosen as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. His appointment was less about grand promises and more about the quiet strength he projected, a reliability that inspired trust among his peers. From the very beginning, Washington understood the enormity of the task. He knew that a conventional military strategy, akin to European warfare, was impossible for an army of farmers and tradesmen armed with mismatched muskets and scant supplies. Instead, he embraced a strategy of resilience and persistence, turning setbacks into lessons. In battles that often ended in retreats or inconclusive skirmishes, his calm demeanor provided a steadying force for his men. His leadership was not marked by grand speeches or theatrical gestures. Rather, it was his presence on the field, his willingness to ride alongside his troops, to share in their hardships, that made him revered. Washington would often ride out to inspect the encampments, listening to his soldiers' concerns and offering words of encouragement. He understood that unity was built on shared struggle and mutual trust. As the war wore on, Washington's reputation grew. Each challenge, whether it was the brutal winter at Valley Forge or the tactical maneuvering during surprise attacks, cemented his role as the heart of the revolution. His quiet courage and unyielding determination inspired an entire nation. proving that true leadership is forged in the fires of adversity. George Washington was more than a military commander. He was the embodiment of a fledgling nation's hopes, a beacon of steadfast resolve in a time when freedom was the only price worth paying. In the midst of revolution and uncertainty, the colonists turned to the power of the pen. The birth of a nation was not defined solely by muskets and battlefields, but by ideas committed to paper, ideas that would shape a collective destiny. This was a time when every written word carried weight, each stroke of the quill a testament to hope and defiance. In the bustling meeting houses, crowded coffee houses, and private studies, influential thinkers drafted a vision for a new society. The Declaration of Independence emerged as a unifying document, a declaration not just of separation from Britain, but of an idea that every person was endowed with inalienable rights. Thomas Jefferson, with his careful yet impassioned words, captured a radical thought, that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. This concept resonated deeply among the colonists, who had long felt the sting of taxation without representation. Before this formal proclamation, however, a quieter revolution was underway. Samuel Adams, John Dickinson, and other early agitators circulated pamphlets that challenged the status quo, their words stirring anger and igniting debates in taverns and town halls. Their writings questioned the legitimacy of a monarchy ruling over distant lands, and they planted the seeds of self-determination in the hearts of ordinary citizens. Across the colonies, newspapers played a pivotal role. They published essays, letters, and reports that revealed the everyday struggles against tyranny. The press became the lifeblood of revolutionary thought, bridging the vast distances between the colonies and uniting diverse voices into a single, resonant call for freedom. The circulation of printed materials ensured that even those in remote farms or coastal towns felt connected to the unfolding drama of revolution. In the fervour of revolutionary spirit, the written word became a tool for empowerment. It was through these carefully crafted letters and manifestos that the colonies began to see themselves as one people, a nascent nation bound by a common purpose and a shared dream. The idea of independence was, in many ways, inked into the hearts and minds of the colonists long before the battles were fought. Thus, a nation was born in ink, one that would continue to evolve, challenge, and inspire generations to come. In the bitter winter of 1777, as the American Revolution waged on, a moment of deep trial came to define the resolve of a fledgling nation. At Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, George Washington's Continental Army found itself camped in the biting cold, far from the comforts of home and the certainty of victory. This was no battlefield marked by cannon fire and clashing swords. It was a crucible where survival itself was at stake. The soldiers at Valley Forge faced more than the enemy's muskets. They battled a harsh winter that brought with it relentless snow, freezing temperatures, and biting winds. Men huddled in makeshift shelters, their bodies trembling in the cold as they shared sparse rations and worn blankets. Disease and hunger crept in like silent invaders, claiming lives not on the field of battle, but within the very camp that was meant to be their refuge. Yet amid the despair, a quiet determination began to grow. Washington, ever the steadfast leader, visited the encampment regularly. He moved among his men, not with grand speeches, but with a presence that conveyed solidarity. He understood that to rebuild an army from the ashes of defeat, morale had to be kindled like a flickering flame in the dark. In those grim months, the soldiers' spirits were slowly forged anew. The arrival of Baron von Steuben, a disciplined Prussian officer, marked a turning point. With patient instruction and rigorous drills, von Steuben transformed the ragged militia into a force capable of standing up to the British regulars. His training programs instilled discipline and confidence, converting chaos into a semblance of order. The hardships at Valley Forge were as much a test of character as they were of endurance. Every day was a struggle against the elements, and every night was a silent promise that the fight for independence would continue. The soldiers learned not only to survive the winter, but to bond together in shared hardship, their collective spirit warming the coldest of nights. In that crucible of suffering, a resilient army was reborn. The lessons learned at Valley Forge of unity, perseverance, and unwavering commitment would carry the Continental Army forward. The brutal winter, while claiming many lives, also cemented a resolve that would prove pivotal in the battles to come. As the conflict on American soil raged on, the struggle for independence was not fought solely with muskets and marching soldiers. It was also waged in the halls of diplomacy. Recognizing that the British Empire's might stretched far beyond the colonies, the revolutionaries knew they needed help from beyond the Atlantic. Thus began a global game of alliances, where former enemies of the crown became unexpected allies. Benjamin Franklin, with his wit and wisdom, emerged as a master diplomat. Sent to France, he carried not only the words of a fledgling nation, but also the hopes of a people yearning for freedom. In Paris, Franklin's charm and intellect captivated the French court. He painted a picture of a nation oppressed by tyranny, a people united in their quest for liberty. His appeal resonated deeply with the French, who, still smarting from their own recent losses in the 7 Years' War, found a kindred spirit in the American struggle. In 1778, the French government, moved by both ideological kinship and strategic interest, officially allied with the American cause. French support brought not only financial aid and supplies, but also soldiers and naval power. French warships soon patrolled the Atlantic, complicating British plans and tipping the scales of battle. The alliance was a turning point, a signal that the revolution had transcended local grievances to become a matter of global importance. But the American Revolution was more than just a Franco-American affair. Other European powers saw opportunity amid Britain's overextended empire. Spain and the Dutch Republic, too, lent quiet support. Although they were not formal allies in the same way as France, their assistance, whether through covert arms shipments or by opening new fronts against the British, added to the mounting pressure on the crown. These international allies turned a regional uprising into a worldwide contest. The American colonists were no longer isolated rebels, but participants in a larger struggle against imperial dominance. With support coming from across the ocean, the revolution began to take on a new dimension, a fight for freedom that echoed the Enlightenment ideals spreading across Europe. Through diplomacy and perseverance, the revolutionaries transformed their isolated struggle into a global movement. And as ships loaded with French cannon and Spanish supplies set sail for America, the message was clear. The fight for liberty was not confined to a single land, but was a universal cry against tyranny. By 1781, the tides of revolution were turning decisively against the British. In a bold and carefully orchestrated maneuver, General George Washington, alongside French forces under General Rochambeau and a formidable French naval fleet, set a trap at Yorktown, Virginia, a coastal town the British believed was a safe haven. The British, under the command of General Charles Cornwallis, had taken refuge in Yorktown, confident that the natural defences and access to the Chesapeake Bay would allow them to regroup and resupply. But Washington had other plans. Through a series of secret communications and careful coordination with their French allies, American and French forces converged on Yorktown from both land and sea. This dual approach meant that Cornwallis found himself encircled on all sides. As the combined forces laid siege, the mood in Yorktown shifted from defiance to desperation. For weeks, colonial and French soldiers set up trenches, placed artillery, and tightened the noose around the British position. Every day, they bombarded the entrenched enemy with cannon fire. The relentless artillery duels echoed over the quiet countryside, a steady reminder that the end was near. Inside the besieged town, Cornwallis grew increasingly isolated. His supply lines were cut off by the French Navy, which patrolled the bay with unyielding vigilance. Reinforcements were a distant hope, as the British government's focus had shifted to other theatres of war. The reality was stark. His position at Yorktown was untenable. In a final, fateful move, after weeks of bombardment and dwindling supplies, Cornwallis recognised that resistance was futile. On October 19, 1781, he formally surrendered to General Washington. The surrender was not just a military capitulation, it was the symbolic end of British rule in America. The fields of Yorktown, once marked by the tension of siege warfare, became hallowed ground, a testament to the power of unity and determination. The victory at Yorktown reverberated far beyond the battlefield. It compelled the British government to negotiate an end to the conflict, leading to the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which officially recognized American independence. In that moment, the dream of a new nation shifted from a rebellious hope to a tangible reality. A nation born not only of battle, but of courage, strategy, and the unwavering belief in freedom. After the cannon fire faded and the banners of surrender were raised, the American Revolution's true legacy began to emerge, not merely in the formation of a nation, but in the enduring idea of freedom itself. The Revolution had achieved more than military victories. It had sparked a profound transformation in how people viewed government, rights, and the human spirit. In the wake of war, the fragile dream of independence now faced the daunting task of nation-building. The newly freed colonies grappled with establishing a system of governance that would reflect the ideals for which they had fought. The Articles of Confederation, their first attempt at unity, soon revealed their limitations. It became clear that a stronger framework was needed, one that balanced the power between state and federal authorities while protecting individual liberties. This need led to the Constitutional Convention of 1787, where delegates from across the states came together to forge a new blueprint for governance. The debates were intense and at times bitter. Compromises were made on everything from representation to the balance of power. Yet the underlying principle remained steadfast. Government must serve the people, and power must derive from the consent of the governed. As the United States began to take shape, the ideas of equality and natural rights continued to inspire. The Declaration of Independence, penned by Thomas Jefferson, had declared that all men are created equal. Although that promise was not fully realized at the time, it planted a seed that would grow and evolve through centuries of struggle for civil rights and social justice. The revolutionary ideals resonated far beyond American shores. They inspired other nations and peoples to challenge their own oppressors and to envision a society where freedom, equality, and democracy were not just abstract concepts, but the very foundation of life. In this way, the American Revolution became a symbol, a rallying cry for oppressed peoples everywhere. The idea that endured was not the conquest of land or the overthrow of a government, but the belief that every individual possesses inherent rights that no ruler can arbitrarily deny. It was a powerful notion that continues to influence debates about liberty and justice today. Thus, long after the battles had ended and the Treaty of Paris was signed, the spirit of revolution lived on. It endures in the ongoing quest for a more perfect union, a reminder that the true revolution was not solely fought on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of those who dare to dream of freedom. Wall. High in the Peruvian Andes, shrouded in mist and mystery, lies a city that seems to float between earth and sky. Machu Picchu, often called the Lost City, beckons the curious with its silent stone walls, terraced hillsides, and panoramic vistas that defy the passage of time. Even before explorers set foot on its ancient paths, local legends whispered of a sacred place, a retreat hidden from the eyes of conquerors. The site appears as if it was sculpted by nature's hand, a marvel of engineering blended with breathtaking landscapes. Its location atop a ridge, embraced by lush green peaks and swirling clouds, suggests that its builders chose this perch deliberately. Was it a fortress, a royal estate, or a spiritual center? The answer remains veiled in the echoes of history. Machu Picchu's architecture speaks of both precision and artistry. Smooth, carefully cut stones fit together without mortar, reflecting a mastery that seems almost otherworldly. Here, nature and man converse silently. Stone terraces, designed to tame steep slopes, now support vibrant vegetation and terraced fields that once fed a thriving population. The city's layout, comprising temples, plazas, and residential quarters, reveals an advanced understanding of astronomy, water management, and urban planning. Every structure appears imbued with symbolism, hinting at the sacred rituals that may have taken place within its walls. Even in its abandonment, the city exudes a calm dignity. Weathered walls and overgrown pathways speak of centuries gone by, yet Machu Picchu endures, a monument to a people whose ingenuity transcended the limitations of their time. Its isolation has preserved an ancient serenity, a timeless snapshot of a culture that flourished high above the ordinary. Local lore mingles with scholarly debate. Some believe Machu Picchu was a royal retreat for Inca emperors. Others propose it was a ceremonial center, a place where the natural world and the spiritual realm intersected. The site's remote setting suggests that it was intentionally hidden, a refuge from the turmoil of empire, or a sanctuary for those seeking communion with the divine. The mystery of Machu Picchu is not only in its origins, but also in its silence. Abandoned suddenly, its stories lie locked in stone, inviting each generation to decipher its secrets. Who built this marvel, and why did they leave it to nature's embrace? The answers lie in the layers of history, waiting to be uncovered. At the heart of Machu Picchu's mystery lies the story of its creators, the Inca, masters of stone and sun. These people were not merely builders, they were visionaries who saw the world through a lens of cosmic balance and divine order. Their techniques, passed down through generations, transformed rugged Andean terrain into a sanctuary of architecture and art. The Inca believed that the sun was the source of all life, a deity whose energy and light were essential to the cycle of nature. It is said that every stone in Machu Picchu was laid with reverence to Inti, the sun god. The city's layout mirrors celestial patterns, and its many temples and plazas align with the solstices and equinoxes, suggesting that astronomy played a crucial role in its design. Here, the movement of the sun and stars was not simply observed but celebrated, with every sunrise and sunset marking a ritual of renewal. Craftsmanship was at the core of Inca engineering. The stonework of Machu Picchu is legendary. Blocks were carved with such precision that they fit together seamlessly without the use of mortar. This technique, known as ashlar masonry, allowed the structures to withstand the seismic tremors common in the Andes. The stones seemed to breathe together, forming walls that have withstood centuries of weather and time. This unity of material and spirit reflected the Inca view of a world where every element was interconnected. Artisans and laborers, organized under the meticulous direction of Inca architects, transformed the landscape. They carved terraces into the steep mountainsides, not only to stabilize the land, but also to create agricultural plots that would sustain the community. These terraces, now overgrown with vegetation, were once meticulously maintained, each level carefully planned to capture the nutrients of the soil and the warmth of the sun. The builders of Machu Picchu imbued their creations with symbolism. In every carved doorway and sundial, there was an echo of their belief in a harmonious universe, a world where human ingenuity worked in concert with the natural order. They crafted a city that was both functional and sacred, a place where the everyday and the divine coexisted. Their legacy is a silent testament to a culture that revered both the tangible and the spiritual, a people who built a city not just to live in, but to honor the sun, the earth, and the eternal dance between nature and human ambition. Every stone and pathway in Machu Picchu seems to whisper secrets of the cosmos, a testament to the Incas' profound understanding of sacred geometry. The city is not a random assemblage of structures, but a carefully orchestrated symphony of shapes, lines, and angles that reflect a deep cosmic order. To the Inca, geometry was not merely a mathematical tool, it was a language of the divine, a means of expressing the harmony between the heavens and the earth. Walking through Machu Picchu, one can't help but notice how the layout of the city mirrors the natural world. The terraces carved into the mountainside follow precise, calculated patterns that manage water flow and soil fertility, while also creating a visual rhythm that echoes the contours of the Andean landscape. These terraces are more than agricultural innovations. They are an embodiment of balance, reflecting the Incas' belief that nature and human endeavor are intertwined. Central to this geometric design is the Intihuatana stone, often referred to as the hitching post of the sun. This carved rock stands as a pivot around which the movements of the sun were observed and celebrated. During the winter solstice, the sun casts a unique shadow on the stone, an event that was likely marked by solemn rituals. The Intihuatana, with its precise angles and smooth surfaces, is a physical manifestation of the Incas' astronomical expertise, serving as both a calendar and a symbol of cosmic order. The city's plazas, temples, and living quarters align with cardinal points and celestial events, underscoring the Incas' commitment to a universe ruled by cycles and balance. At Machu Picchu, east-west alignments hint at the rising and setting of the sun, while north-south orientations may correspond to other stellar phenomena. Such precision in planning demonstrates an advanced knowledge of astronomy, which was interwoven with spiritual practices. In the hands of the Inca, geometry was a sacred art. It was used not simply to build, but to create a space where the human spirit could commune with the universe. The layout of Machu Picchu invites visitors to ponder their place in the grand tapestry of existence, a reminder that the cosmos, with all its intricate design, is both a mystery and a mirror reflecting the beauty of human aspiration. Through this intricate geometry, the lost city becomes more than an archaeological wonder. It transforms into a portal, bridging the tangible world with the realm of the divine. Despite its breathtaking beauty and ingenious construction, Machu Picchu was mysteriously abandoned, leaving behind questions that have puzzled historians for centuries. The silence of the city, preserved in the Andean mists, speaks volumes about a sudden departure, a departure that transformed a vibrant hub into an eternal enigma. Several theories attempt to explain why the Inca would leave behind a place that showcased their most refined achievements. One prevalent idea suggests that the abandonment was a strategic decision. As the Spanish conquistadors swept through the Andes, the Inca may have intentionally evacuated Machu Picchu to keep it out of enemy hands. Hidden high in the mountains, the city was perfectly suited for defense, yet its isolation could also serve as a sanctuary, a place to retreat when the tides of war turned against them. Another theory posits that natural factors played a role. The rugged Andean environment, with its unpredictable weather and challenging terrain, may have gradually made life at Machu Picchu unsustainable. Frequent earthquakes and landslides could have damaged key structures or disrupted the delicate balance of water and agriculture that the terraces depended upon. Over time, these environmental pressures might have forced the inhabitants to seek safer, more accessible areas. Yet another perspective looks to internal dynamics. Some historians speculate that political shifts within the Inca Empire led to the city's abandonment. As power centers shifted and new capitals emerged, Machu Picchu may have lost its administrative and cultural significance. What was once a royal retreat or a spiritual center might have simply been left behind as the currents of history moved in a new direction. Regardless of the cause, the abandonment of Machu Picchu was not marked by destruction or decay, but by a quiet withdrawal. The city was left as if its inhabitants had vanished overnight, leaving behind perfectly aligned stone structures and terraced fields that slowly reclaimed their purpose in nature. This deliberate preservation has allowed Machu Picchu to endure through the centuries, offering modern visitors an unaltered glimpse into the Inca's sophisticated world. Today, the mysteries of abandonment only add to the allure of Machu Picchu. The silence of its empty plazas and the whispers of its forgotten corridors invite us to ponder the fate of a people whose wisdom and ingenuity were matched only by the enigmatic end of their great city. In the silence of Machu Picchu, the lingering echoes of ancient rituals and spiritual reverence still resonate, inviting us into the soul of the Inca world. The city was more than a strategic stronghold or a royal retreat. It was a sacred space, meticulously designed to honor the divine forces that governed life in the Andes. Throughout Machu Picchu, evidence of ceremonial practices is woven into the very fabric of the architecture. Temples, plazas, and even certain rock formations appear intentionally placed to serve as conduits between the mortal and the divine. The Temple of the Sun, with its perfectly curved stone windows and niches, was a focal point for rituals dedicated to Inti, the revered sun god. Here, worshippers likely gathered at dawn to witness the first light, a daily renewal that symbolized rebirth and hope. Adjacent to these grand temples were smaller shrines and ceremonial platforms, their modest size belying their spiritual significance. These spaces served as intimate settings for personal prayers, offerings, and communal gatherings. The careful alignment of these structures with astronomical events suggests that the Inca orchestrated their rituals to coincide with the cycles of the heavens, imbuing their ceremonies with the natural rhythm of the cosmos. The sounds of ritual once echoed through these stone corridors: chants, the rustle of ceremonial garments, and the rhythmic beating of drums, each element a vital part of the sacred performance. Offerings of food, textiles, and even precious metals were likely presented to appease the gods, to ensure fertility of the land and prosperity for the people. These ceremonies were not merely acts of devotion, they were a reaffirmation of the community's identity, a declaration that their lives were interwoven with the cosmic order. The very layout of Machu Picchu hints at this deep connection with the spiritual realm. Pathways and staircases guide visitors from everyday life into zones imbued with sacred purpose. Each step taken is a journey through layers of history and belief, a progression from the mundane to the divine. Even today, as modern visitors walk these same paths, a sense of reverence pervades the air. The rituals of the past, though long silent, continue to speak through the stones and terraced fields, a timeless testament to a culture that sought to bridge the gap between earth and sky, between the human and the eternal. Beneath the well-trodden paths and stone terraces of Machu Picchu lies a world that remains unseen, a hidden life that thrived long before modern eyes discovered its secrets. Beyond the grand temples and ceremonial plazas, everyday spaces tell a quieter story of daily life in an ancient city suspended in the clouds. The residential quarters of Machu Picchu offer a glimpse into the lives of its inhabitants. Narrow, winding streets connect clusters of stone houses, each built with the same meticulous care as the public buildings. These dwellings, though modest compared to the temples, were designed to accommodate families whose lives were intertwined with the city's spiritual and agricultural rhythms. Inside, spaces once buzzed with daily activities, the preparation of food, the mending of textiles, and the shared laughter of community. The absence of modern amenities is replaced by a profound ingenuity, an architecture that integrated natural light, ventilation, and the surrounding landscape into everyday living. Water was the lifeblood of Machu Picchu. Ingenious channels and fountains were not only feats of engineering, but also a testament to the importance of water in sustaining life. These systems distributed water from nearby streams to fields, homes, and public areas, ensuring that both the sacred and the mundane were nourished. The delicate balance between urban planning and natural resource management speaks to a deep understanding of the environment that the inhabitants possessed. Archaeologists have uncovered remnants of workshops where skilled craftsmen worked diligently, fashioning tools, ceramics, and textiles. These artisans contributed to the daily rhythm of the city and helped maintain its cultural identity. The artifacts they left behind provide clues to the methods and materials used in their work, hinting at a sophisticated economy that supported not only survival, but also artistic expression. In the quiet corners of Machu Picchu, vestiges of community life, such as communal hearths and storage areas, reveal that the city was once a bustling centre of interaction. It was a place where individuals came together to share knowledge, trade goods, and celebrate the changing seasons. Though the grand structures capture the imagination, it is the hidden, everyday spaces that truly reflect the heartbeat of this lost city. The hidden life of Machu Picchu is a reminder that every stone has a story, and every path echoes with the voices of those who once lived, loved, and built a world in the clouds. Even as the stones of Machu Picchu stand in silent testimony to the brilliance of the Inca, they also whisper of a sudden and unexplained departure. The city, once filled with the voices of daily life and the rhythms of ritual, now rests in quiet solitude, a place where nature and time have gently reclaimed what was once a bustling center of human endeavor. The abandonment of Machu Picchu remains one of its greatest mysteries. Historians and archaeologists have long debated the reasons behind its sudden desertion. Some suggest that the city was intentionally abandoned to protect sacred knowledge and treasures from the Spanish conquistadors, who sought to dismantle the Inca way of life. Others believe that a series of natural calamities, earthquakes, landslides, or a prolonged drought, might have made life unsustainable in such a high-altitude environment. Walking through the ruins, one cannot help but feel the lingering echoes of a community that vanished almost overnight. The finely crafted stone walls, terraces, and staircases stand undisturbed, as if frozen in the moment of departure. There is no evidence of a violent struggle or chaotic destruction. Instead, Machu Picchu appears to have been quietly left to the embrace of the mountains. Its abandonment was not marked by debris or signs of a hasty escape, but by a deliberate withdrawal, a choice to leave behind a masterpiece of architecture and culture. This mysterious exodus only deepens the allure of the lost city. The empty plazas and silent corridors evoke questions about the lives that once animated the space. Who were the people who gathered in these squares? What dreams did they nurture as they looked out over the Andean peaks? And why, despite all its splendor, was the city eventually left to the whims of time? The echoes of abandonment resonate in every overgrown pathway and every weathered stone. They serve as a poignant reminder that even the most magnificent creations can fall silent, leaving behind only whispers of what once was. In the stillness of Machu Picchu, the past lives on, a timeless invitation to explore, to question, and to remember the impermanence of all things. Centuries passed, and the silent majesty of Machu Picchu remained hidden in the rugged peaks of the Andes, its secrets locked away beneath layers of mist and time. It was not until the early 20th century that this lost legacy was rediscovered, sending shockwaves of wonder through the world of archaeology and history. The rediscovery of Machu Picchu was as dramatic as it was serendipitous. In 1911, the American explorer Hiram Bingham, guided by local indigenous whispers and legends passed down through generations, stumbled upon the ancient city. His arrival at the site unveiled a masterpiece of Inca engineering, one that had been preserved by its remote location and the protective embrace of the mountains. Bingham's expedition captured the imagination of the global community. Photographs and accounts of the breathtaking vistas, the precision-cut stonework, and the enigmatic structures quickly spread beyond academic circles. Suddenly, the world was introduced to a civilization that had once flourished in harmony with nature and the cosmos, a culture that had achieved the impossible in both art and architecture. The rediscovery of Machu Picchu sparked a new era of research and cultural renaissance. Scholars from around the globe converged on the site, seeking to piece together the history of a people who had mastered both the natural and spiritual worlds. New techniques in archaeology, ranging from aerial surveys to advanced dating methods, began to unravel the complex tapestry of the city's past. Every stone, terrace, and carved niche was examined, each offering clues about the Incas' innovative agricultural systems, their sophisticated urban planning, and their deep spiritual connection to the environment. Beyond the academic realm, Machu Picchu quickly became a symbol of cultural pride for Peru and the broader indigenous heritage of the Americas. Efforts to preserve and study the site were ramped up, ensuring that its legacy would endure for future generations. Local communities embraced the influx of interest, blending modern tourism with traditions that celebrated the ancient Inca way of life. Rediscovering Machu Picchu was more than an archaeological triumph. It was a reclamation of history. It reminded the world that even in the remote corners of our planet, extraordinary stories lie hidden, waiting for the curious and the brave to bring them into the light. Today, Machu Picchu is not merely an archaeological marvel preserved in stone. It is a living legacy that continues to inspire and educate people from around the globe. The ancient city stands as a testament to the ingenuity, resilience, and spiritual depth of the Inca civilization, a legacy that reverberates in modern culture, art, and even the way we approach sustainable living. For the people of Peru, Machu Picchu is a source of immense national pride. It represents not just the achievements of the past, but also the vibrant cultural heritage that continues to shape contemporary identity. Local communities honor the ancient traditions by integrating Inca customs and folklore into everyday life. Festivals, rituals, and crafts celebrate the connection between the present and the ancient world, ensuring that the spirit of the Inca remains alive in the hearts of new generations. The global fascination with Machu Picchu has also transformed it into a beacon for cultural tourism and international dialogue. Visitors from every corner of the world come to experience its breathtaking vistas, intricate stonework, and the palpable silence that speaks of centuries gone by. This influx of global interest has not only boosted local economies, but has also fostered cross-cultural exchange, allowing modern societies to reflect on sustainable practices and the importance of living in harmony with nature. Scholars and scientists continue to study Machu Picchu, using cutting-edge technology and innovative research methods to unlock further secrets of Inca society. Drones, satellite imagery, and 3D mapping have revealed new insights into the city's construction, its water management systems, and its astronomical alignments. These discoveries contribute to a deeper understanding of how the Inca interacted with their environment, offering lessons on resilience and sustainability that are increasingly relevant in today's world. Furthermore, Machu Picchu has inspired artists, writers, and filmmakers who draw upon its mystique to create works that resonate with themes of mystery, nature, and the passage of time. This creative legacy ensures that the spirit of Machu Picchu endures far beyond its physical remains, continuing to evoke wonder and reflection. In this way, Machu Picchu lives on, a timeless bridge between the ancient and the modern, reminding us that the greatest legacies are those that inspire continuous discovery and reflection. Ludwig van Beethoven was born into a world of sound, a world filled with the melodies of church choirs and the strains of local folk tunes. From his earliest days, his environment pulsed with music. His father, Johann, recognized a spark in young Ludwig and pushed him to master the piano and violin. Even as a child, Beethoven displayed an uncanny ability to memorize and reproduce complex musical phrases. His determination and raw talent quickly set him apart in the bustling musical scene of Bonn, where every note carried the promise of greatness. Yet, amid the applause and accolades, subtle shadows began to gather. In his late teens, Ludwig experienced the first hints of trouble, moments when the world of sound would blur and fade. At first, it was a slight buzzing in his ears, an occasional distortion during rehearsals. As he practiced relentlessly, these disturbances grew more pronounced, leaving him momentarily disoriented. But the young Beethoven pressed on, channeling these strange experiences into his compositions. In the vibrant salons and crowded concert halls of his youth, Beethoven's music was a testament to the beauty of sound. His early works echoed with the passion of youth and the precision of a prodigy. Yet, even as he basked in success, he began to sense a profound change. The music that once flowed effortlessly now came with an undercurrent of challenge. The vibrations of a piano's keys, the resonance of a cello's deep tones, these were becoming not only his instruments of expression, but his lifelines. His genius was already being recognized across Europe, yet his internal world was shifting. The seeds of his later silent struggles were sown in these early years. Even as critics marveled at his dynamic compositions, Beethoven was learning to listen not just with his ears, but with his entire being. Every sound, every silence, was a note in the symphony of his life. This was the beginning of a journey that would redefine what it meant to hear. In the innocent exuberance of his early performances, Beethoven's passion for music was limitless. Little did he know that the very challenge that would later seem insurmountable, his gradual descent into silence, was also the key that would unlock a deeper, more profound understanding of music itself. As Beethoven's star rose in the courts of Vienna, an insidious change began to take hold. At first, the signs were subtle. A muffled note here, a missed beat there. Conversations grew difficult, and the rich textures of symphonic harmonies slowly slipped away like echoes in a vast, empty hall. The brilliant composer, once surrounded by the full spectrum of sound, found himself increasingly isolated in a world that was gradually dimming. By his early 30s, Beethoven's hearing loss had become undeniable. Letters filled with despair began to circulate among his closest friends and colleagues. In private moments, he would trace the contours of his piano, almost as if trying to feel the music that his ears no longer could. Yet, in the midst of this personal catastrophe, a remarkable transformation was underway. Unable to rely on the conventional pathways of sound, Beethoven turned inward. He began to explore music through its physicality, its vibrations. Every thump of the bass drum, every subtle tremor from a string's resonance, was now a language of its own. He discovered that by placing his hand on the instrument, he could feel the pulse and intensity of the notes. In these tactile moments, he found solace and inspiration, a way to reconnect with the art he loved. This new way of experiencing music became his secret ally. While the world outside struggled to understand his condition, Beethoven was learning to hear with his body and his memory. He recorded melodies in his mind with astonishing clarity, each vibration etched into the fabric of his soul. In his secluded study, surrounded by sheets of paper filled with notations, he composed symphonies that would later shake the foundations of classical music. But this journey was not without its torment. The isolation and frustration of losing something as fundamental as hearing weighed heavily on him. Every silence felt like a loss, and every vibration was a reminder of what was fading. Yet, it was in this crucible of despair that Beethoven's most innovative ideas were forged. His inner world, now filled with a new kind of sound, was beginning to shape his legacy. A legacy defined not by what he lost, but by what he discovered in the quiet. In the echoing stillness of his own making, Beethoven embraced the challenge. His struggles with deafness became the very canvas upon which he painted his greatest musical visions, visions that would forever change the way we understand the power of silence and sound. When the vibrant notes of concertos and operas became elusive, Beethoven discovered an alternative language, vibrations. In his silent world, every physical pulse from the instruments around him transformed into a tangible sensation. As his hearing continued to deteriorate, he learned to rely on the rhythmic thrum of strings and the resonant beat of percussion to guide him. He would press his hand against the piano, feeling the reverberations travel through his skin, connecting him to the pulse of the music. The sensation of vibration soon evolved into a method of hearing that was uniquely his own. Beethoven would sit in his modest studio, where the heavy, resonant tones of a well-tuned piano filled the room. Placing his hand on the instrument's soundboard, he absorbed every nuance. The deep rumble of a bass note, the gentle tremor of a high-pitched trill. Each vibration carried meaning, a silent symphony that his mind would translate into complex, layered compositions. For Beethoven, these physical sensations were more than just substitutes for sound. They were a doorway into an inner realm where music existed in its purest form. It was here, in this tactile universe, that he began to compose his most daring works. With each vibration, he felt the interplay of rhythm and emotion, capturing fleeting moments of inspiration that defied the constraints of silence. His notebooks filled with sketches of melodies and harmonic structures, blueprints for symphonies that would later captivate the world. In time, this new way of experiencing music reshaped his creative process. No longer confined by the limitations of traditional hearing, Beethoven's imagination soared. He embraced a broader spectrum of sound, a blend of memory, emotion, and physical sensation. The vibrations became the heartbeat of his compositions, driving him to experiment with dynamics, texture, and form. Every throb of the instrument was a reminder that music was not solely an auditory experience, but a universal language accessible through touch and intuition. Even as his hearing faded into oblivion, Beethoven's ability to translate the language of vibrations into masterpieces grew ever stronger. His inner concert hall, a world built on the echoes of tactile sensations, became the birthplace of symphonies that would defy time. It was a realm where silence was not empty, but filled with the infinite resonance of memory and feeling, a world that would soon give rise to some of the greatest musical achievements in history. In the depths of his personal silence, Beethoven forged a new path for creativity. Unable to rely on the external sounds that once inspired him, he turned inward to his vast reservoir of memory. Every note he had heard in his youth, every melody etched in his mind, became a precious resource. In his private study, surrounded by scattered sheets of paper and ink-stained manuscripts, he composed in a language of silence, a language where every stroke of the pen was a testament to his indomitable spirit. Beethoven's process became intensely solitary. He would sit for hours, sometimes days, immersed in thought as he carefully crafted each musical phrase. Without the distraction of ambient noise, his inner world took center stage. Memories of long-ago concerts, the timbre of orchestral instruments, and the emotional cadences of his early compositions guided his hand. He transcribed these recollections with a precision that bordered on the mystical, turning recollected sound into written masterpieces. The act of composing transformed into a meditative experience. Beethoven learned to hear the music within the confines of his mind, a process both painstaking and transcendent. He would experiment with variations of themes, modulating and layering them until a complete symphony emerged on the page. In this silent sanctuary, creativity was freed from the constraints of physical hearing. It was an intimate dialogue between his soul and the eternal language of music. Challenges abounded. Frustration, isolation, and the relentless encroachment of silence tested his resolve daily. Yet, in those moments of darkness, he found an unexpected clarity. The absence of sound forced him to focus on the pure structural elements of music: harmony, rhythm, and counterpoint. His later works, marked by intricate interweavings of melody and emotion, are a testament to this refined artistry, a reminder that true genius can flourish even in silence. Beethoven's notebooks reveal the fervor of a mind that refused to be silenced by deafness. Each page is a chronicle of perseverance, capturing the evolution of musical ideas that would later echo across concert halls and generations. His compositions from these silent years are imbued with a raw intensity, as if every note is a defiant proclamation against the void. In the quiet, Beethoven rediscovered music, not as a series of sounds, but as an immersive experience crafted from memory, emotion, and the palpable vibration of life itself. Through this inner music, he created symphonies that continue to resonate with audiences around the world, reminding us that even in silence, there is an eternal song. As Beethoven's silence deepened, a new realm of composition emerged, a realm where sound was felt, not heard, and where the symphony of the inner world became his greatest creation. In this phase of his life, the composer embarked on what many would later call his unheard symphony. It was a body of work that transcended the physical limitations of hearing and embraced the full spectrum of human emotion, memory, and tactile experience. In his secluded study, Beethoven began to experiment with musical ideas that defied convention. No longer relying solely on auditory input, he explored the interplay of rhythm, harmony, and structure through pure intellect and sensation. Every vibration he felt in the instruments, every echo of his own heartbeat, became integral components of his compositions. The resulting music was not a replication of what once was, but a bold reimagining of sound itself. This creative period was marked by intense, almost obsessive dedication. Beethoven would spend countless hours perfecting each movement, meticulously adjusting the dynamics and counterpoints until the music resonated perfectly within his inner ear. His focus was absolute, a meditation on form and feeling that yielded works of profound depth and complexity. The symphonies he composed during these years were characterized by dramatic contrasts, innovative structures, and a poignant, almost haunting quality that spoke to the isolation and determination of his condition. Critics and contemporaries would later marvel at how a man who could no longer hear the world around him could produce music that seemed to capture every nuance of the human experience. His later symphonies, the ones conceived in silence, are celebrated for their emotional intensity and technical mastery. They are works that defy the ordinary, speaking to listeners in a language that transcends sound, a language that is as much felt as it is heard. Within these compositions lies the essence of Beethoven's genius, an ability to turn personal tragedy into a universal expression of hope and resilience. His Unheard Symphony is a reminder that creativity knows no bounds. Even when deprived of one's primary sense, the human spirit can find new ways to perceive, to create, and to inspire. In the silence of his later years, Beethoven transformed loss into art. His music became an everlasting conversation between memory and imagination, a dialogue that continues to captivate, comfort, and challenge us today. The journey into silence was as much a personal battle as it was a creative transformation. As Beethoven's hearing faded, isolation seeped into every aspect of his life. The vibrant concert halls and lively gatherings were replaced by solitude and introspection. In the midst of this loneliness, the composer faced not only the loss of a sense, but the loss of connection with a world that once celebrated him. Each day brought new challenges. Social interactions became strained, as the inability to engage fully in conversation led to misunderstandings and a profound sense of alienation. Beethoven found solace in his music, which became his sole companion. The echo of his own heartbeat, the memory of past sounds and the vibrations of his instruments offered a fragile connection to a world he could no longer hear. Yet it was within this isolation that Beethoven's inner strength shone brightest. Determined not to let silence define him, he immersed himself in his work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. His studio became a sanctuary, a refuge where he could communicate with the universe through the language of music. Every stroke of the pen on manuscript paper, every carefully notated measure, was a step toward reclaiming the lost voices of his past. Friends and patrons witnessed a man transformed by his struggle. While some lamented the loss of the great conductor's listening ear, others marveled at the fierce determination that fueled his compositions. His letters reveal moments of deep sorrow, mixed with bursts of creative inspiration, a testament to the paradox of his condition. In the stillness of his isolated world, Beethoven discovered an unexpected clarity. The quiet allowed him to focus solely on the architecture of his music, the interplay of themes, the balance of dissonance and harmony, and the intricate tapestry of emotion woven into each composition. This period of solitude also forced Beethoven to confront the inner workings of his mind. He delved deep into memories of earlier sounds and performances, reconstructing them with a precision that was almost surgical. These recollections became the foundation for his later works, an archive of auditory treasures preserved in the corridors of his memory. Though isolation brought pain and despair, it also cultivated an inner resilience that would come to define his legacy. Beethoven's battle with loneliness, his relentless pursuit of artistic perfection despite overwhelming adversity, stands as a powerful reminder that even in the darkest silence, the human spirit can create a light that echoes through eternity. In the absence of external sound, Beethoven constructed an extraordinary inner concert hall, a private realm where music was not experienced through the ears but through memory, emotion, and vibration. This inner space became the wellspring of his creative genius, a place where past experiences merged with unbridled imagination to form a unique musical language. Within this mental sanctuary, every composition was a dialogue between what had been and what could be. Beethoven would close his eyes and recall the symphonies of his youth, the vibrant orchestral clashes, the tender piano melodies, the resonant chords that once filled concert halls. He could almost hear the voices of his mentors and the applause of enraptured audiences. These recollections served as both inspiration and foundation, guiding him as he crafted new works that transcended the limitations of his physical hearing. Here, in the silent theatre of his mind, Beethoven experimented with form and structure. He explored bold harmonic shifts, layered counterpoints, and daring rhythmic innovations, all the while relying on the tactile sensations of vibrations and the vivid imagery of musical memories. The inner concert hall was not bound by the constraints of reality. It was a realm where every emotion found expression in sound, where every nuance of human experience could be rendered into music. This internal world was a refuge from isolation, a place where the tumult of everyday life faded away, replaced by the clarity of pure, unadulterated creativity. In these moments of deep introspection, Beethoven was free to explore the deepest recesses of his soul. The resulting compositions bore the unmistakable imprint of his struggle and triumph, a blend of raw emotion, technical mastery, and transcendent beauty. The inner concert hall also served as a bridge between the past and the present. Beethoven meticulously documented his ideas in countless notebooks, each page a window into the intimate process of his musical creation. These manuscripts reveal a man who, despite his growing silence, was more connected to music than ever before. Every note was a memory resurrected, every phrase a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In this sanctuary of soundless symphony, Beethoven redefined what it meant to create music. His inner concert hall became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even when the external world grows quiet, the internal echo of passion and genius can produce works that resonate far beyond the limits of time and space. In a world that expected silence from a man who could no longer hear, Beethoven defied expectations with a defiant outpouring of creativity. His silent years were not marked by resignation, but by a fierce determination to push the boundaries of musical expression. Every composition became an act of rebellion against the limitations imposed by deafness, a declaration that art transcends physical constraints. Beethoven's later works, composed in the solitude of silence, were imbued with an intensity and complexity that stunned audiences. He reimagined the symphony as a vast canvas upon which he could explore the full range of human emotion. Each movement was meticulously crafted, balancing intricate counterpoints with bold, dramatic themes. These compositions were not merely music, they were epic narratives of struggle, triumph, and the relentless pursuit of beauty in the face of adversity. Defying the odds, Beethoven continued to innovate, using every tool at his disposal. He relied on mathematical precision, deep-seated memory, and the tactile feedback from instruments to guide his creative process. His notebooks, filled with sprawling sketches of musical ideas, reveal a mind that was constantly at work, an endless conversation between silence and sound. The deaf composer transformed isolation into a catalyst for innovation, channeling his frustrations into works that would forever change the course of Western music. Critics and contemporaries marveled at the audacity of his vision. Even as he lost the ability to hear the performances of his own compositions, he could listen in his mind, ensuring that every detail was perfect. His determination inspired those around him, encouraging fellow musicians to explore uncharted territories in music. Through these defiant acts of creation, Beethoven not only expanded the boundaries of what was musically possible, but also redefined the very nature of art. His late symphonies, concertos, and chamber works are celebrated as triumphs of the human spirit, a powerful reminder that true genius lies in the ability to overcome adversity and transform limitations into boundless possibility. Beethoven's silent years stand as a testament to his indomitable will, a reminder that when the world grows quiet, the inner voice of creativity can speak louder than ever. Long after Beethoven's final breath, his music continues to resonate across time, a timeless echo of brilliance born in silence. His compositions, forged in the depths of isolation and hardship, have transcended the confines of his physical world, touching the hearts and minds of listeners across generations. In every note and every chord, there is a story of struggle, resilience, and an unwavering belief in the transformative power of art. Beethoven's legacy is not measured solely by the symphonies he wrote or the innovations he introduced to musical form. It is defined by the spirit with which he confronted the challenges of his life. His silent years remain a poignant chapter in the history of music, a period when a man, deprived of one of his greatest senses, discovered new ways to perceive and create sound. He taught us that music is not merely an auditory experience, but a profound interplay of memory, emotion, and the human capacity to feel beyond the physical. Today, Beethoven's masterpieces continue to be performed in the world's grandest concert halls and the humblest community gatherings. They serve as a bridge between the past and the present, a dialogue that spans cultures and eras. Audiences listen not just to the notes on the page, but to the echo of a soul that defied silence and turned it into an everlasting song. His journey inspires countless artists, musicians, and dreamers. In classrooms and rehearsal spaces, the story of Beethoven's silent years is recounted as a powerful reminder that limitations can be transformed into sources of creativity. His life challenges us to look beyond our circumstances and to find beauty in the unexpected. Beethoven's eternal echo reminds us that the power of music lies in its ability to communicate the deepest truths of the human experience, a language that speaks directly to the heart, even when the ears can no longer hear. His legacy endures in every performance, every inspired composition, and every life touched by the transcendent sound of his genius.